Is sidechaining something that we're only going to do when we're producing French house? Is sidechaining only reserved for French house? No, no. Is there sidechaining in country music? Yes, yes, oh yes. There's sidechaining in all kinds of music, right? Sidechaining is in everything. When live musicians are on a stage and they're playing together and they're grooving together, is it fair to say that they're sidechaining themselves humanly by listening and reacting and grooving together? I'd say yes. I do. And I know we have, organic acoustic producers and electronic producers, and then a lot of you who are doing both. So I think you want to just be cognizant of how important sidechaining is. And when we go and do electronic production, those tracks are not listening to each other like musicians listen to each other unless we tell them to listen to each other. And the way we tell them to listen to each other is by creating sidechain matrices, right? That's the plural for matrix. And they can be very simple, and they can be also very complex. What's the most typical sidechain relationship in a track? What's the kick and bass and the kick, however you want to put it. You're correct. And usually 99.99% of the time, the kick is the dominant and the bass is the submissive. This takes it to another place. I'm always looking for a better word than that. One is the alpha and one is the beta. How about that? That's Greek. And we'll leave it at that. So usually the kick is the alpha. We just solved that together. And the bass is the beta, which means when the kick kicks, the bass ducks a little bit. Why is this so popular? Well, do kicks and basses share common frequencies? They sure do. When two instruments sound that have common frequency real estate, what happens is a couple things. One, you're telling your speakers sometimes to do something kind of tricky, and the speakers can get a little confused and clogged up. We say when we're mixing and mastering, we play speakers, but also you'll get sensitive to it. There's something called collision distortion, and it sounds like really like that. It does. Sometimes it's a little crunchy, funky, unmusical thing that happens when complex frequencies in the same range sound at the same time. Has anyone heard this? I feel like clear my throat. It is like, okay, good. Yes. And it's one of those, what I call ghost distortion. Why do I call it ghost distortion? It's because you're mixing away and you're mixing and you're hearing this weird distortion because you're sensitive, and we're all sensitive. That's why we're all together. And then you're like, oh, that doesn't sound good. What is that? And then you solo each instrument, right? Each track, and you don't hear it when you're soloing any of the tracks. And you're like, oh, I must be tired. I'm crazy. I'm just getting a little crazy here. And then you go out of solo and everything plays again and you hear it again, right? That's a ghost. That means these are two things that by themselves, independently, they're fine. But when they play together in the sandbox, they don't play nice. So how do we remedy that in a static fashion? What's the static remedy for that? We just did it. EQ. Yep. And EQ is cool because then you're saying you're going to live over here mostly, and you're going to live over here mostly. And now I'm separating you two. No more fighting in the sandbox, right? So, and we do that all day, especially, in very clearly unwanted frequency zones. What's the downside about making this static move? It's static, small, lose power. It's flat. It can be. You're getting close. I'll say this. If you say, well, hey, the kick's the alpha, the bass is the beta, let me trim down that giant bass so when they're playing together, the kick is dominant. What happens in your arrangement when you have 16 bars of no kick? Do you have to have a skinny small bass just because when the kick plays later, it has to be beta? You feel me? So what happens is what it allows you to do is let things be as big as they want to be when they're by themselves. But when the kick, that alpha kick comes, or whatever is alpha in your production, then things have to, dance with it, right? They have to dance with the kick. I always say sidechaining is a lot like the tango. Does anyone here know how to tango? I don't. But I like Astor Piazzolla, but I don't know how to tango. Not easy, I don't think. Nobody's doing a lot of tangoing, especially not now. But in the tango, uh, exactly. In the tango, one dancer lunges forward, and right at that moment, the other dancer lunges backwards, and it's very dramatic. And this way, they don't knock each other out and have a collision distortion and a concussion, right? So the same thing happens with music. When the kick lunges forward, the bass steps back, and they're dancing together, right? They have a symbiotic musical relationship, and they're listening to the alpha kick. But you can really go well beyond that, right? Does the bass and piano, like piano chords and a bass, do they have similar frequencies? Sure. So would it be cool to have, when the bass plays, that the piano ducks, certainly maybe in the frequencies that they share the most? Sure. What if the piano had a mid-side processing? I'm not trying to make it more complicated. What if the center of the piano ducked when the bass played, and then the stereo piano was left intact? What if the shaker track dipped a little bit when the kick kicked to make a groove? So it wasn't a stiff shaker, it was a bouncy shaker. What if the reverbs ducked to the kick to make a breathing reverb sound? You can go on and on and on building these very, very beautiful sidechain matrices. Would it be cool if you had a whole bunch of background singers and a lead singer, that when the lead sang, that the backgrounds ducked a little bit to make space for the lead? Would that be cool? Sure. What if you had a guitar solo and a whole bunch of rhythm guitars, and you wanted that guitar solo to speak over those rhythm guitars? Could those rhythm guitars duck? Yeah. So the possibilities are absolutely endless in a beautiful way. So that's why we care. So now we have a kick, and the kick sounds like this. It's a common household kick. And we have a bass and they play together at the same time. Not always, if you see the arrangement, but in this section. So that's a fun bass. So now when they play together, they sound like this. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's not really grooving. And for those who are sensitive to collision distortion, which I am, and you will be if you're not already, do you hear a little bit of funky rub in like the mids a little bit, just like a yucky thing? Okay, good. So hopefully that's bothering you. And so how are we going to remedy this? Good. We're going to take a compressor. FabFilter Pro C2 for single band compression. I find it very, very hard to beat. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set it up for sidechain compression. And each program's a little different. Each DAW is a little different. In Cubase, we go over here and we activate the sidechain link enable. So we're saying, hey, Pro C2, You're not going to listen to the bass. You're going to listen to an external signal, and you're going to move your crazy compression wiggle body, not listening to the sound itself, but a totally different sound. But you're going to wiggle that bass while not listening to the bass, but actually listening to a completely different sound. Right? The way compressors work, without getting too technical, is that they have a sidechain circuitry. The signal comes in and it splits off in two. One signal is going to wait for the voltage controlled amplifier, which is just the little elf turning the fader up and down. And the other copy is inside the sidechain. It's what the elf is listening to determine how that elf is going to move the fader up and down. That's the sidechain signal. And so the elf is listening to it, and then we set the threshold to say, elf, only react to that. And then when you do react, here's the ratio, here's the attack time, react right away, chill out a little bit, let it go right away, hold on a little bit. And we create the shape of the compression of the elf's behavior based on our control settings inside that sidechain. So usually the bass comes in, the bass hangs out, waits for the elf to do its thing, and the elf listens to that other copy of the bass. Then we tell the elf how to behave with the controls, and then the elf starts to make that actual sound go up and down, mostly down, right? And then let go. So we can say to the elf, keep your finger on that bass fader, but you're not going to listen to the bass. You're going to listen to the kick. And when that kick kicks, you pull the bass down. And when the kick stops kicking, you let go. And do it the way I'm telling you to do it. You don't have to be mean, right? You can be nice and do it the way I'd like you to do it. So what we're doing here is we're telling Cubase, you're going to get an external signal. And then down here in this little pull down, we're going to tell it which signal. And here is we're going to say, listen to the kick. And then we can adjust the send level. And then we have a very interesting option here. We can have this send that's coming from the kick. We can have this send pre-fader or post-fader. Pre-fader or post-fader. Post-fader is looking to the east. Pre-fader is looking to the west. What do we want? Pre-fader or post-fader for our sends to our sidechain beta elements? Everyone post? All right, defend yourself in audio court. Why? The answer is pre, but why? Why do we want that send from the kick to the bass to be pre, not post? So you can mix the kick independently without changing the sidechain characteristics. Do you see what Marley said? Marley's right. Of course, because we're creating a dance between these two elements. What if it's post fader, that send, and I say, hey, I need a little more kick. Do I disturb the sidechain dance that I set up so carefully? Yes. If it's pre-fader, once I get them grooving, then I can independently change the levels and the groove isn't changing. Understand? Yes? Okay. Now we're going to let's set up our Pro C2, and once you do this, and the same settings will work for any compressor, so don't worry about that. What's the first thing I'm going to do? Okay, oversampling. Thank you. Turn on oversampling if it's not already on. Just make sure it's on. Good. Do I do the threshold yet? No. Can I set the starting ratio? Yes. How about 6-to-1? Some people like to go straight for 10-to-1. I'm a 6-to-1-er. Thank you. I agree. Let's just make our way from left to right. Can we pick an elf personality? Which one do you like? Do we want something sluggish or very reactive? I agree. What's the most reactive one? What's the quickest? Clean. Good. You guys are geniuses. Attack. Fastest. Is it cool? Can I go fastest? Sure. How about release? Variable for sure. Somewhat fast. I agree. How about 9 o'clock or 8:30? You good with that? Let's do that. Okay. Auto release or not for this? No. No, not for a kick, right? A kick is a kind of a static fixed thing, so we don't need auto release. It's not a guitar solo. Auto gain on or off? Off. We don't want to make it duck and then add gain back. That feels like we're working against ourselves. Off. Knee, hard or soft? Big time. Range, we don't know yet. We don't know the range yet. Hold, we don't know yet. To be determined. Exactly. All right, I'm feeling good about this. Let's sidechain compress. So what you're telling me is the kick is soloed, the bass is soloed. All I have to do is hit play to get this party started and squeeze down on the threshold, right? One other little thing. Down here, if this sidechain window is not on, you will be lost in space. So when you click this middle sidechain button, it gives you these extra controls, and you want to make sure that you're in external sidechain. You're telling the elf to listen to this external sidechain, not the signal itself. Now, once you've done all this, what do? Well, you go here and you save as a preset NLS sidechain or whatever sidechain, your name, whatever you're like. And this way, when you're rushing and you're mixing, you don't have to do all those moves by hand, right? So take a moment and save your favorite sidechain setups, because it's a lot of little things. And sometimes when we're rushing, we forget stuff. And you don't want to forget something like that or any of this stuff. It's all good, okay? You'll get 1 week back a year of doing, repetitive tasks. Okay, so you're saying all I have to do now is I'm ready to go, and I've guessed just like we always do, and then I can tweak stuff, but let's get the party started. So I hit play, and I'll pull down on the threshold. Okay, woohoo, we're sidechaining. And you can see this going across the screen from right to left. What are we seeing? What is this in Elf Talk, this thing that we're seeing moving across the screen? It's gain reduction is engineer talk. It's showing you the history, the real-time movement of the elf's finger pulling the fader down, listening to the kick, right? That's what it's showing you. So when we talk about the shape of a compression, can you see the shape of compression now? Yes? Okay, good, because that's the way I want you to think about it. When we talk about the shape of compression, that's what we talk about. Okay, so now it's a party, and we're getting there, but we're not there yet. So now I'm going to bypass this on or off, and tell me if you can hear it grooving more and colliding less. Can you start to hear that a little bit? Okay, good. It's groovy, baby. Okay, so this is good, right? But let's make it a little bit better. we said now that the elf is listening to this external sidechain, and we also have a really cool ability, and we can do this with internal or external sidechains. We can EQ the signal that the elf is listening to. Why would we do that? Why would we cut the lows off the sidechain signal or the highs or band pass it? Why would we do that? For a tighter kick. Exactly. And there's all kinds of ways that we can what we call bias the sidechain signal. We can make it say, hey, don't listen to the low end. Whenever the low end kicks hard, ignore it. What would that be good for? What if we put a compressor on a whole drum bus and we wanted it not to react to the kick power, but just react to the mid range and the highs? Could we tell that elf, look, when that kick is knocking, don't do anything. Wait for the mid range and then do something. Right? There's all kinds of stuff. Could we also say on an acoustic guitar compression that we say, listen a lot to 6K? You know, if we'll push up 6K, and if you hear 6K, jump down on it. What would that do? Make it less harsh? To be overly sensitive to 6K? Exactly. So there's all kinds of fun things we can do. But first, we have to hear what we're doing. So down here, we have filters that we can turn on. We can slide these around, and we can, even do crazy stuff like get really sensitive to this or get really sensitive to this, and then when you do that, pull the sound down. So there's all kinds of options here. But in order for us to EQ the sidechain signal, we have to be able to hear the sidechain signal. How do we hear the sidechain signal? Audition. Yes. So what you're saying is if I hit audition right now, I'm going to hear the kick, right? Is that what you're telling me? Let's test out your theory. Am I doing this right? Am I hearing just the kick, or am I hearing the regular kick going into the mix and the audition signal? Am I hearing both? Yes, I am. Would I be able to really filter the signal properly if I'm hearing the raw kick go out into the mix and I'm trying to hear this other thing? No. So what do I need to do? I need to unsolo the kick. So I just hear the bass lead and I can EQ it. So this is going to work, right? So here we go. Boom. I'm still in audition. I'm going to hit play. Ah, there's no sound. Why? Why is there no sound? Because it's soloed. But then how do I do this? How can I not have the kick playing and hit audition and still be able to EQ this kick? How do I do this? Well, let me tell you, it's tricky. And in each DAW, you have to dig deep sometimes. But in Cubase, if we go to preferences, there's a million gazillion preferences here. And if you go down, hiding in the middle of absolutely nowhere, the title of this bunch of preferences, the title has its own preferences. Who in the world would have ever known that? It took me 10 years. I always went through all these. I didn't think the titles had their own. Like this one doesn't. And this one does. A little crazy. So in here, we have something in VST. And look, it's a weird, crazy preference. Mute pre-send when mute. Are we sending pre-send to the sidechain? Yes. So now when I mute that channel, it mutes the pre-send. Do I want that? No. So now I hit no. Stop it. Right? And I close this. I hit OK. Now when I hit audition, hit play, am I going to hear it? So be aware that in order to play this game of EQing and filtering the audition signal, one, you have to be sending pre-fader, and two, you have to figure out in your DAW how you can listen to make sure that the pre-fader sends are not playing, are not muting when the sound is muted, that the pre-fader sends are not muted. If you cannot find this preference in your DAW, what's the dirty workaround? Just to do this. What would be a dirty workaround if for some reason your DAW is not playing nice? You could mute all the other channels, but you don't want to hear the kick while you're EQing the sidechain copy of the kick. So, and you're sending pre-fader. So what's the dirty workaround? I know we're thinking, pull the fader down to the kick. Yes, Haro is on it today. You see what he's saying? Just for this, it'd be a pain to do, but you could take a note of whatever the fader level is and just pull it down to do this and then push it back up. When you push it back up, are you going to mess up your sidechaining that you created? No, because it's pre-fader. Everyone following this? Yes? Okay, beautiful. All right, but here we found out how to do it. So let's go back here, and now let's EQ this kick. So what we're saying is that big subby long kick is making for a kind of a sloppy sidechain trigger. Some people don't even use a kick. They use a ghost sidechain of a side stick, but we want a crisp trigger. Say that 3 times fast. We want a crisp trigger. We don't want a long, soggy, bassy trigger. So we're EQing it and we're tightening up and we're band passing this. And now, yeah, exactly. So it's not such a big, sloppy, heavy trigger. So now we can go out of audition and readjust our sidechain relationship. So let's go out of audition, and then just so we get everyone's playing together, here's our kick again. So watch me bypass, especially this low cut. Listen to the sidechain behavior, how it gets wobbly and sloppy when the full kick is what's triggering the sidechain. We like it crisp and tight, right? Not wobbly and waiting for that long bassy kick to sound. Everyone following this? Yes? Okay, good. So now what else is there left to do? Well, I'll tell you, the hold. This is where the hold shines like a diamond. So the hold is magic. So what the hold does, to remind you from compression week, is it delays the release behavior. And what it allows you to do in this particular instance is look at the gain reduction, the finger movement of the elf, and make a little kick space. So it just holds down just the right amount. You can see it visually. If you, I guess you could do it, measure the length of your kick or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide this hold slowly until I make a little space that feels like I'm letting the whole kick, and then the sidechain will be focused, more focused. Here we go. so easy when you know what to do. And now that stiff thing is now grooving. And I'm hearing the tone of the kick clean, right? How do you know when you're making progress with your sidechain setup between a kick and a bass? What's the easiest way to know that you're actually winning? The kick gets louder. That's it. That's it. The kick gets louder. Why does the kick get louder? Because the bass is getting out of the way. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And because this is visual, um uh we can really fine tune the way that this works. Is this making sense to everyone? How would post fader come into sidechaining? Why is it there? It's not there. Uh, it's just there because it's there. That's a terrible answer, but it's not there because there's all these times when you'd want to do that. I don't think. I can't think of any. It's just there because it's an option to be there. Okay, one more thing to do. Now that everybody's grooving, the range, home on the range. So let's do the range. What does the range say? The range says you can do all the sidechain ducking you want, but don't go past here. And it works like this. And it's that easy. With the range, if it starts ducking too far, you also get a kind of a weird sloppy bounce. If it's not far enough, you're not having as much fun as you should be. So you use the range to kind of find that, and again, just like any of our engineering, it is good to see what too far is. And and then sort of back off of that. Pretty amazing, this Pro C2 as a sidechain tool. You really get very, very, very precise sidechaining. And then we can, even go to another element, like here's the shaker. And it has some life to it. It's not that stiff. We can go here, go to the insert, make sure that this is all set up good. You can be very subtle. And then when you get everybody grooving and everyone listening to each other like musicians on a stage, you get this bouncy, alive thing that happens once you get all your sidechaining together. The range doesn't override the ratio, but it kind of makes a hard stop on the downward motion of the gain reduction. So it's yeah, exactly. So the ratio is going to say, have this type of behavior, and here's our target. And it says, yeah, let's do all that, but there's a hard stop here. So it gives you exactly what you had in behavior, but just less depth, if so to speak. Both. Sidechaining is something that you would do on a group, but what happens is now that you get good at it, you're going to kind of want to do lots of things individually to get it just the way you hear it in your mind, rather than some people send like 800 elements to a bus and they sidechain that bus. And that's your French house where everything's breathing with the same envelope, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a style. But for more complicated, complex things, you'll want to make them by hand, I think. For sure. This is, yes, you keep this live, David. This you can't print. If you render your sidechains, then they're not live anymore, and they're not going to play nice. So render all of your fancy saturation, compression, reductive EQ, but keep your sidechains and your additive EQ live. All right, listen, mixers, have a lovely rest of your day. I'll see you next week. Cheers.